of Barack Obama in the world at a time when he's low in the opinion polls back home, but also unpopular or less popular abroad, certainly after saying that he won't be approving a push this week for Palestinian statehood at the United Nations. With us to discuss it, Zachary Miller of Democrats Abroad, Stuart Haugen of Republicans Abroad, from Bucharest, Walid Fares, who teaches at National Defense University, from Cali, Colombia, where he's on the lecture circuit, Maher Javandafar of MIPAS, the Middle East analyst there, and Thierry Marchal-Beck of the youth wing of the French Socialist Party. Back in May, an opinion poll came out saying that Obama's popularity in the Muslim world is pretty low. This, remember, is before this was before the capture and killing of Osama bin Laden. There you see those numbers for back in May, and this is of the view of the United States, and that's even lower. You can see those numbers. Those numbers in the case of Turkey and Pakistan, lower than they were in 2003 when the U.S.-led war in Iraq was most unpopular in the Arab world. Walid Fares, do you agree that the United States is less popular in the Muslim world today than it was in 2003? Does that seem right to you?
So I always had a view on how to frame these questions on these polls, in the sense that when you ask a question to someone sitting in Damascus or in Cairo, are you with or against the United States, and then collect about 1,200 of those, you are operating in an environment which is very pressured, which is very difficult to operate. It's not Sweden or France or New Zealand, in the sense that the Arab Spring today, most of the people who took to the streets in Cairo or in Tunisia, or before that in Beirut and Tehran, they look at the United States. If it stands with them, with their calls for more freedom, then they are favorable. If at some point in time the United States would stand with the dictators, then they're going to be a negative attitude. Now, there has been this one central idea by many analysts that above all issues, the Arab-Israeli factor determines the view. I disagree with that. If you ask young Egyptians or young Syrians today, what is the most important thing on your agenda? For the Egyptians, it's the revolution. For the Syrians, it's to bring down Assad. Yes, of course, they agree at some point in time the Arab-Israeli conflict, the Palestinian cause, will have to be resolved. But I don't think we're getting the right image from the Middle East with regard to the measurement of how to look at the United States or how to look at President Obama, for that matter.
On that point, an article on the front page of this Wednesday's International Herald Tribune goes into great detail about how the U.S. State Department's working behind the scenes to help the opposition and prepare for eventual regime change in Syria. That's low-key. So was the U.S. military might that was instrumental in toppling Colonel Gaddafi in Libya, where Washington made good on its pledge to no longer take the lead role, leaving last week's heroes welcome in Tripoli and Benghazi to Nicolas Sarkozy and David Cameron. When you see those images of the French flag being hoisted in Benghazi, Maher Javandafar, what are your thoughts on Barack Obama's efforts to take a backstage?
Well, I think President Obama certainly deserves credit for what he did in Libya. The support that the United States provided, I think, would have been very difficult, and as far as some people are concerned, impossible for NATO to have helped the opposition the way they did. So I think he definitely needs credit for that. But I think in terms of Syria, it's going to be much more tricky. Syria is a country that's got influence in the region. Taking down Assad could have regional consequences. But I think, President Obama sooner or later is going to have to find that he needs to be involved. But I think that the covert or behind-the-scene mode that he has selected, I think, is a very wise one. At this moment in the Middle East, I think if the U.S. is seen as being at the forefront of any revolution, after what happened in Iraq, after the invasion there, I think that could actually damage the credibility of the opposition. So I think it's a very wise move on the part of President Obama. But if you just allow me just to add one more point regarding the Arab-Israeli conflict and President Obama there, I actually think as an Israeli, the expansion of settlements is an impending disaster for my country. And I think anybody...
But yours is a minority view.
It is absolutely. I am actually in an absolute minority. But I think, as you know, I think President Obama and his support for Israel has been steadfast. And there are people in Israel who value it very much. But I have to say, majority of Israelis are very scared of land compromise to the Palestinians for two reasons. One of them is that after we withdrew from Gaza, Hamas attacked us and actually undermined our security. And the other is that Israel is actually becoming a more religious country, and the religious bond between people and West Bank is actually growing. And these to make it much more difficult for Israel to compromise.
All right, so the clock is ticking there. Zachary Miller, let's just get back to the point that Meyer made in the first instance about how Obama's right to have played it low-key when it comes to Libya and Syria. But we're talking about politics. You need to toot your own horn sometimes, don't you?
Well, first you have to consider that politically what he did going along with France and England about Libya was politically damaging to him from his political base. I mean, I personally have friends who donated the max to the campaign who were very upset about our involvement in Libya. So, but what this president does is he doesn't make decisions based on what's politically popular or what the polls say. He weighs the information he receives from his advisors, and he goes ahead and makes a decision. Now, the decision was not popular at all in America for a lot of his base. So I think that's one thing you have to consider, that what this president is doing is sometimes isn't popular, but he's doing what he feels is the right thing.
Thierry Marchal-Beck, how do you see the role of France in relation to this president who's spelled it out, his defense secretary spelled it out as well, that America isn't going to take the lead role every time anymore?
I think that U.S. is not an empire, and I hope U.S. is not going to be an empire. I think we need more. We need lots of people at the table in order to make the decision. So U.S. is not going to have a very strong role like it did without asking any question, like during the time Bush went to war in Iraq. And I think that it's better to say that the table of the world is not the table of one country, and that's a good thing. The most important things for European, now we've got to take the lead at some points, because we've got, for example, an Israel. It's a state with lots of tension inside the state of Israel. Palestine, it's an authority that is strongly divided. We've got two territories that is fighting at each other, and inside each of these two territories, people are fighting. We know that we need to have a peace table. We need to have new people. So if it can be France, it's great. If it can be the European Union, it's much better. We are going to need to have money. We may be going to need to have soldiers involved. We are going to need the United Nations. But not all solutions are going to come from the US. But one thing's for sure, it will be a lot easier with a Democrat president than with a Republican president, but we need a Democrat that can say to his base, especially on the East Coast, I'm not going to be the puppets of... I don't understand why Netanyahu or Israeli political far-right leaders have so strong influence inside the Republican Party, inside the Democratic Party. And it seems today that if you don't have Netanyahu backup, you're not going to be the next president of the United States. And that's the main reason why I think Barack Obama didn't have a stronger agenda on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Meyer Javandaf, our final point on this before we move on. We all thought that there'd be a repeat of the last time Netanyahu was prime minister, and basically he was dressed down by the then U.S. president. And would you say that Netanyahu has gotten the better of Obama?
I don't think he has at this point yet. I think there's, he has influence, but I think there's also voices within the Jewish community in the United States who are becoming very worried about his lack of strategy, that he has not put forward any strategy. And I think his influence is weakening, although he does have some influence. And let's not forget, in Israel in 1999, we had elections basically because President Clinton fell out with Netanyahu, and there was a whole sorts of political domestic implications which led to the downfall of his government. So I don't think we should rule out the influence that the United States has at this moment also. But I think in the long term, we all have to think about what's good for Israel is good for the Palestinians, and what's good for the Palestinians is good for us. And I think any president that's going to bring a sustainable solution that's good for both sides is going to be welcomed by majority of the people in the Middle East and not just Israelis.
All right, I want to show another poll now, that's also from the Pew Research Center, that's quite startling. The public image of the United States on the wane in Western Europe, in places like Britain and Germany. And you'll see here that there was a big dip at the time of the Iraq War, Obama's election, most notably there, Germany and Britain. You see the numbers going down. And Stuart Haugen, we're hearing with the economic crisis, a lot of recrimination towards America right now here in France, towards credit rating agencies, towards the U.S. financial system, accused of dragging us down. Do you sense in your workplace, you're a businessman, do you sense a growing anti-American sentiment?
I don't know if it's anti-American. It's certainly a massive disappointment in the lack of leadership. And I think we're seeing this whole discussion tonight, if you get right down to it, the core theme is lack of leadership, whether it's Palestinian leadership who can't step up, Israeli leadership who can't step up, or U.S. leadership in Congress and at the presidential level who just cannot get together and get something done.
How does it manifest itself?
Well, we're scaring people to death that we're going to take the rest of the world down economically with some kind of a semi-default. And I don't particularly want to criticize Republicans for the debt facility issue, because I think somewhere you have to put a stake in the sand and say, we've got to stop spending. If we raise revenues later, that's fine. Right now, we have to stop spending. We spend way more money than we can afford to spend, and you can't just tax the rich.
Because of the war in Iraq.
No, it isn't. No, that's silly. You need numbers. You need numbers to make that argument. The numbers don't add up. The numbers don't add up. We spent $1 trillion over 10 years in Iraq, and we have $1.5 trillion deficit this year. It doesn't add up, my friend.
It's because of tax cuts?
No,
it's because of the politics.
It's because Obama raised spending and Bush raised spending, and we're doing things we can't afford.
It was during Bush presidency.
No, it wasn't.
8 years of Bush presidency.
No, it wasn't.
That you had the bubble, the economic bubble was during Bush presidency. It was during the Bush presidency.
That's wonderful left-wing garbage, but it is garbage nonetheless. It's garbage.
Walid Fares.
That's very Republican.
Hold on.
It's very true.
If you disagree, you are garbage.
Please.
I didn't say you were garbage. I said the story is garbage, my friend.
Please, let me just ask Walid Fares, because you did mention at the outset, Walid, that the big thing that's changed in the past year is the Arab Spring. But the other change, you could say, is also the fact that there is a renewed worry of a financial crisis. And to a certain degree, is the U.S. and Barack Obama's star power in trouble because of it?
Well, all began when President Obama projected into the Middle East things that Middle Easterners, actually political fascists in the Middle East, thought he's going to deliver. Remember, he went to Istanbul, delivered a speech there. Then he went to Cairo and delivered an even more important speech. Now, those forces that are opinion makers in the Middle East, those who thought that President Obama is going to do the super pressure on Israel and is going to change things in the Middle East by shifting America from being at war to being a force that is... He wasn't able to deliver. So the arguments that he made, and he said, this is going to be U.S. policy, he wasn't able to deliver. But again, for reasons that are beyond him, the fact that the Middle East has changed, the Arab Spring, he wasn't able to, in the middle of that Arab Spring, to go and work on one single issue, because he could have lost Egypt and Tunisia and Libya and Syria and maybe the pressure on the oil and Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. So you have to look at what Obama tried to promise, what he tried to deliver, and that's why there is a disappointment, but not among everybody in the Middle East, among the forces that thought he is going to go into their direction.
All right. Obama, for Walid Fares, with his hands tied to a certain degree. Obama's fortunes, ultimately, everyone around this table can agree, may lie with the chart we're about to show you. The unemployment rate, which since 2008 has surged. Right now it's at 9%. There's also the president's style, a professorial style, some say, which perhaps this week got a bit of a makeover when he talked about taxing the rich.
Either we ask the wealthiest Americans to pay their fair share in taxes, or we're going to have to ask seniors to pay more for Medicare. We can't afford to do both. Either we gut education and medical research, or we've got to reform the tax code so that most profitable corporations have to give up tax loopholes that other companies don't get. We can't afford to do both. This is not class warfare. It's math.
All right. Writing in the Washington Post, liberal columnist Dana Milbank described President Obama's new plan as, quote, unrealistic, highly partisan, and a non-starter on Capitol Hill. That's what's so good about it, he writes. Zachary Miller, the president, he needs to rough it up a bit more, says Dana Milbank.
Yeah, well, I think, that's been the information that's been coming from the base for quite a bit of time. But, this president came in wanting to basically work with the opposition, wanting to try and work together and get things done in the spirit of Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan so many years ago. That didn't happen. This Republican Party right now has become the party of no. A lot of it because of the new Tea Party generation that's become basically taking over the party. But, first you have this financial crisis that the president came into office with. You have an economy that was plagued by 2 wars and tax cuts in the same administration. So that's what he came in with. So he did all he could do to fix the economy. Now we do need jobs. And hopefully this president can appeal straight to the people now, because he's tried for all this time to appeal to the Republican Party. He's got to appeal straight to the people now and say, this is what we want, this is what I want, let's do it.
What you were mentioning, Thierry Marchal-Beck, before the show, we were talking about if Obama needed coaching on his political smarts. What was it, the phrase that you employed?
I think Obama is a very strong campaigner. I think he's very weak when you have to make a deal and to negotiate. And I think Republicans are very strong as during a negotiation. And I think if we on the leftist point of view, from economic in Europe, in the US, it was a long time ago that we wanted to hear this kind of words in President Obama's mouth. But we need, if he wants to win and to implement this kind of policies, he needs to have a strong majority at the Senate, and in the House. So he's going to do campaign on this kind of issues.
We're out of time. So just in a word, do you see Barack Obama changing his style in this year, in this run-up to next November's election?
No, he's certainly not doing the Clinton and right in the middle. I will simply say that in terms of negotiation, I don't think we win negotiations because we're good negotiators. I think we win negotiations because truth wins out in the end, and the position is right.
That's why you lost by 10 million votes last time.
All right, we'll leave it there.
That was last time, Zach.
Zachary Miller and Stuart Haugen.
Change, baby.
Many thanks. Thierry Marchal-Beck, I want to thank you. I want to thank Walid Forez for joining us today from Bucharest, and Mayer Javandafar from Cali, Colombia. And thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Stay with us. Coming up next, it's time for Business, presented by Marcus Carlson.
Every day, thousands flee the war and famine in Somalia. In 3 years, the number of Somali refugees at the Dadaab camp in Kenya has increased from 90 to 450,000. People are crammed into the camp, desperate for food and medical care. Despite being the richest country in East Africa, Kenya is also fighting famine in the north of the country, where people are dying of hunger. Kenya. Charity begins at home. Thursday, 9:45 p.m. Paris time on France 24.